Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter, along with my colleague Ashley Martella. We're joined today by a very special guest, leading candidate for the Republican presidential nomination in 2008, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney. Without raising taxes or increasing debt, he balanced the budget every year of his administration, closing a $3 billion budget gap inherited when he took office.
Governor Romney also reformed the education system by establishing a scholarship program to reward the top 25% of Massachusetts high school students with a tuition-free scholarship to any state public university or college. He also proposed and signed into law a private market-based reform that ensures every Massachusetts citizen has health insurance without a government takeover and without raising taxes. Earlier, Governor Romney was in private business as a management consultant and venture capitalist.
Governor Romney is the author of the brand new book, No Apology, The Case for American Greatness. Welcome to Newsmax TV, Governor.
Thanks so much, Kathleen. Ashley, good to be with you.
Governor. Nice to have you here. We know that you're on your book tour now, and you even paid David Letterman a visit recently. He has a reputation for being, some say, unkind, maybe even nasty to conservatives, especially Sarah Palin. How did he treat you?
Well, he was actually very interested in what I had to say. I was surprised that this was not sort of a give and take with a lot of humor, but instead he asked some pretty serious questions about health care, for instance, about the economy, about getting jobs. He did ask me what I thought about Sarah Palin, and I said she's terrific. She's brought energy and passion to our party. He was not happy with that answer, but all in all, a very interesting chance to meet somebody who's iconic in America, very fascinating and delightful character, and someone who I have to admit I watch from time to time and get a great laugh out of his monologues.
Many politicians have books coming out about saving America. How is your book different?
Well, this is not a book about my relationship with my parents or my upbringing or even about my campaign in 2008 or campaigns before that. This is a book about what I have seen as a result of my years in the business world, some 25 years, traveling a good deal overseas, and my recognition that what's happening internationally very much threatens America's economic lead and ultimately threatens our ability to preserve freedom and to promote liberty around the world. So I have described the fact that America needs to remain strong, that we need to stop apologizing for who we are and acknowledge that what we have and what we have done has lifted the world out of poverty and has also provided freedom to millions, billions of people, and that we need to shore up the bases of our strength. And if we don't, we could find ourselves being passed by China or by others. And the consequences of America following the same path of decline that other great nations have in the past are really unthinkable. And I'm concerned that what Washington has done over these last couple of decades is put America on a path to decline. And we've got to change that course and do so urgently.
Democrats believe in spending our way out of the recession. For example, the nearly $800 billion stimulus program. Now, as a businessman with your background, is it working and are we in recovery?
Well, I think you're going to see the American economy recover. That is something which always follows every recession. Now, the president's going to try and take credit for the fact that the recession will end. But every recession has ended. Anywhere in the world, they all end at some point, and this one will end. The problem is his almost $800 billion stimulus was not as effective as it could have been. And President Obama's strategies overall and his actions during his first year in office have had the effect of extending the recession and deepening the recession. As you recall, he said if we passed the $787 billion stimulus bill, that it would hold unemployment at 8%, but that if we didn't pass it, it would get all the way up to 10%. Well, it got to 10%, and we still have $787 billion we've got to pay back to the people we borrowed it from. It's as if China gave us a big credit card and said, go ahead and use as much of this as you want. And America has become increasingly vulnerable as a result of our overspending.
Bush tax cuts are set to expire at the start of next year, and President Obama wants to tax what he calls the rich. Could this cause a stock crash for investors?
Well, it's hard to predict exactly what's going to happen in the market. I know there are some who are predicting a very significant decline. I think you have to recognize that with the expiration of the Bush tax cuts, that's one way that President Obama calls it. I call it a new tax hike, a very substantial tax hike on people who pay a lot of taxes. what's going to happen is those folks are going to tend to take their income this year if they can. They'll sell things that have capital gains this year when the rates are a little lower. Instead of taking deferred income for the year after, they'll say bring it forward to this year. And as a result, the government should see a lot of excess revenues this year. But the year after, it's going to be pretty tough for the government. And so people are going to be, I'm sure, seeing a softening of expectations in 2011 and 2012. At least that's my best guess at this point.
Now, Republicans were divided in their support for TARP and bailouts to Wall Street, including AIG and GM Chrysler. Senator John McCain now says that he regrets supporting TARP. Looking back, was it wrong for us to bail out banks and businesses, and should we have allowed some of these businesses to fail?
Well, there's no question but that businesses that get in trouble should be allowed to fail, that shareholders should see their investment gone. If they bet on a management team and a board that doesn't do the job right and makes mistakes, why they're going to lose their investment. And management teams are likewise going to have a heads roll, if you will, if they mismanage an enterprise. On the other hand, it's important to make sure that we don't see a collapse of the financial system, which is required for our currency to have value and for people's savings to retain value. And therefore, President Bush and Secretary Paulson's plan to, on an emergency basis, put a TARP provision in place to preserve the financial system was the right thing to do. Had we not put TARP in place, we would have seen a cascade of failures, not just on Wall Street, but across every street in America. And so it was the right thing to do. It was administered by Secretary Geithner in a way that I think was ineffective. And at this stage, it has done its job. It should be stopped, and the funds that remain in TARP and that are paid back to TARP should be used to pay down our debt and to reduce our spending.
Turning to health care, some Democrats say Obama's health care overhaul is pretty similar to what you instituted in the state of Massachusetts and presided over. What do you say to that?
Well, there are some similarities, of course, but there are some very big differences. Actually, Secretary Sebelius, Secretary of HHS under the Obama administration, in Meet the Press just recently said, look, they're very, very different, and I agree with her. They're very, very different, and I'll tell you the places that the differences are most pronounced. One, and most fundamentally, ours is a state-based plan. America has a federalist system, meaning states get to make their own choices on areas that have not been reserved to the federal government. And in that case, we took responsibility for dealing with an issue. We solved it our own way. States should be allowed to approach their care for the poor in the way they think best, rather than having President Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Harry Reid apply a one-size-fits-all plan to the entire country. Number two, we didn't raise taxes. They're raising taxes dramatically throughout the entire healthcare system and on certain individuals as well. Three, they're cutting Medicare. So they're putting a burden on senior citizens to help pay for this. Four, they're substantially increasing the entitlement obligations and unfunded liabilities of the country. And then one more I'd mention, and that is President Obama has sought a power to put in place price controls. We don't do that either. So a lot of significant differences, but net, getting people insured is a good thing. You don't want free riders, people just showing up at the hospital expecting someone else to pay. But the way that President Obama has gone about it does not make sense at all.
What is your take on President Obama? Some critics, like Glenn Beck, say that he is a socialist. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think there's no question but that liberals like President Obama believe that if there's a problem in our country, that if some aspect of our economy is having some difficulty, that the right course is to have government play a more active role, really to have government take it over and run it. And if you think that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were well run, or if you like how the post office runs, or you like how Amtrak runs, then I could see you're thinking in that direction. But that's a course which I think is entirely wrong. If there's an area in the economy that's not working well, the right course is typically to say, how do you get government out of it? How do you get it to work more like a market? How can you get consumers to have more influence in how that area of the economy works? In healthcare, for instance, if we want to solve our healthcare challenges with the high cost of healthcare, get healthcare to act more like a market, as you do with health savings accounts, for instance. But President Obama's initial reaction anytime there's a problem is more government, government control, government hold the shares of GM, government hold the shares of AIG, and so forth. That's frankly the wrong way to go.
Governor, what role does the Tea Party have in the Republican Party, and do you think it'll have an impact in this upcoming election?
Yeah, I really think it will have an impact in the election. I'm frankly very pleased that the silent majority is silent no longer. that you're finding people who have in the past watched TV or read the newspapers and shaken their heads and said to their spouse, you know, can you believe what they're doing in Washington? And now they're saying, you know what, I'm going to go to a meeting and I'm going to speak up and let people know how angry I am at what I'm seeing happen to our country. That is a good thing. Now, not all the Tea Partiers are Republicans. Not all of them will vote for Republicans, but I think most of them will.
Could they hurt the Republican Party? For instance, there's a Tea Party candidate running in Nevada who supposedly has 11% of the vote now and will draw away from a Republican candidate. Well, it could be divisive.
Well, if there's a conservative candidate that runs in the general election, then obviously, you know, divide and fail is the result. Hopefully, Tea Party candidates will run in respective primaries, and they'll either win or lose. If they win, they'll go into the general. If they lose, they won't, and they'll get behind the more conservative of the two finalists. If we go in a direction of dividing our conservative effort in the general elections, why, we'll just basically hand the country to Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, and that would be very sad indeed, because this is not who gets the power in the Republican Party at stake. This is what's going to happen to America. That's what's at stake right now.
Do you see a growing libertarian movement within the party, especially since at the recent CPAC meeting, Ron Paul won the straw vote?
I don't really see any change in the libertarian effort. There has long been a libertarian strain in American politics. It typically comes together with the Republican Party, but it's been part of conservatism for a long time. The good thing about libertarians is that when they're called to show up somewhere, they do. And when they get a call in the night saying, hey, we need you to show up at CPAC or to show up at a straw poll or show up at an event, they'll show up, and you got to congratulate them for that. But I don't think there's a growing portion of Americans who are, if you will, Ron Paul devotees. But he has an influence, and welcome his participation in our party. It's a Big Tent party.
You mentioned Sarah Palin earlier. You told Wolf Blitzer recently that you think she's well qualified to be president. Now, not too long ago, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush sat in the very chair you're in and told us that while she's a person of great character, she lacks substance. Meanwhile, a Newsmax Zogby poll finds that Palin is the overwhelming favorite of Republican voters for president. Where do you think this is all headed?
You know, time will only tell. I love what Yogi Berra used to say. He said, I don't like forecasting, particularly if the future's involved. And in this case, the future's involved, so it's hard to know what'll happen. I was asked by Wolf Blitzer, do you think she's qualified to be president? The answer is yes, sure she is. Will she be our nominee? Time will tell. I'm not sure she'll run. I don't know that she knows whether she's going to run or not, but she's brought a great deal of energy and passion to our party. That's a good thing. And people will have to decide whether she has all of the skills that they think are necessary to lead the country if she decides to run. But you know, more power to her. Keep her voice loud and strong, and hopefully convince more folks of the error of the way of those in Washington who are making government larger and larger, borrowing more and more money, and putting at risk the future of our country with the extraordinary deficits and unfunded liabilities associated with our entitlements.
The Florida Senate primary race, Republican primary race, is being watched closely across the country. It pits Governor Charlie Crist against Marco Rubio. Do you have a favorite candidate in that race?
I like them both. There's a movie which is one of my favorites called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And in that, the deciding vote is by one fellow, and he says, I'm with both you fellers. And I feel the same way. I like both of those individuals. I haven't decided whether or not to endorse one or the other or neither, but I hope whoever wins the primary is able to carry on very effectively in the general election. We need more Republican senators in Washington very, very badly right now. You know, Charlie is somebody who is a well-known and respected governor. Marco Rubio, as a Hispanic American, brings a lot of energy to that movement within our party that we badly need. So I wish we could choose both, but at this stage haven't made a selection.
Rush Limbaugh says you made a grave, grave error in endorsing John McCain over J.D. Hayworth in the Arizona Republican primary. The era of McCain is over, says Limbaugh. What say you?
Well, you know, I find it hard to disagree with Rush Limbaugh on topics, but on this one I do. I know Senator McCain. I think his experience in the military, in the Senate, and the wisdom and judgment which he has developed over a lifetime is something which we need in the Senate. I think it serves our country well. I also believe that it's essential that we win the election, the general election, and send a Republican back to Washington. I think Senator McCain has by far the best prospects of being re-elected senator from Arizona rather than somebody who would be new to the scene. So yeah, I'm very much in favor of doing what's right for the country. It may not be right for me politically, but frankly, the country's in a posture right now. We face such challenges right now. It's time for people to do what they think is right for the country, and to spend less time worrying about what may or may not be good for them politically.
National security is a big issue for Newsmax readers and viewers. In No Apology, you expressed disappointment about the president's so-called apology tour. Recently, former CIA Chief General Michael Hayden was recently here on Newsmax TV and sat in your same exact seat, and he said that President Obama has done a good job on national security issues, most of them. Where do you differ with this president on the issue of national security?
Well, first of all, he was simply wrong to go across the world as the new president of the United States, establishing who he was by, if you will, distancing himself from the United States of America. That's not something I'd want to do, particularly as president. He said that America has been dismissive to other nations, derisive, that we don't listen to the concerns of other nations, that we've dictated to other nations. He's wrong. America has freed other nations from dictators. So I think it was a very, very bad course on his part. And he has followed that up with a number of decisions which I think are wrong. When the Supreme Court of Honduras rejected their president, said he'd violated their constitution, somebody who was, by the way, pro-Chavez, anti-American, our president, President Obama, insisted that he be put back in office. When Colombia looks for favored nation status because of its battle with Venezuela, we should have immediately acceded to that request. He says, no, hold them off. He kicked sand in the face of the Czech Republic and Poland by pulling back from a missile defense system, supposedly to reset relations with Russia. But we got nothing from Russia in terms of our need to get them to support our tough sanctions on Iran. He goes to the United Nations and speaks out against Israel at the United Nations, instead of speaking out against Hamas that has launched 7,000 rockets into Israel. Step after step have been very, very badly taken on the foreign policy front. Now, there's some things I appreciate. One of them is that he reversed course on Iraq. As the candidate who I believe was the most anti-war candidate among the Democratic contenders and who promised to pull our troops out immediately, he has instead adopted President Bush's strategy in Iraq. Thank heavens. That's the right course. And I appreciate him having changed course in that. And likewise, he voted against the surge in Iraq, said it wouldn't work. In Afghanistan, he's now applying a surge. I appreciate that as well. So he's done some things well, some things not so well, but where he's done well is where he has adopted the policies and positions of Senator McCain and President Bush.
The name of the book, No Apology, The Case for American Greatness. Governor Mitt Romney, congratulations on your new book. You can get it. It's sure to be a bestseller. You can get it on Amazon.com and also Newsmax.com. Good luck with it, Governor, and thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us here at Newsmax TV.
Thanks, Ashley and Kathleen. Good to be with you.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV. Sarah Palin's new book, Going Rogue in American Life, will be released on November 17th. You can be among the first to get your copy. Check out our incredible free offer for Sarah's new book. Just go to Newsmax.com and click on the top banner for this great offer. Act today.